Hello and welcome to another episode of Magicians Only. Are you a magician? Should you be listening to this? That's all right. Everyone is welcome. We are going to discuss some secrets over the course of this podcast series, but mainly we're going to be talking about, entertainment. So this could be entertainers only. This is about the journey. It's about the craft of any kind of entertainment, really, or really following your dreams. So we're going to be I'm going to be discussing the adventures I've had in my life as an entertainer. Occasionally I might interview friends of mine who have insane stories. We might delve into magic for the past, magic of the future, where magic is going, and even talk about, some pretty great secrets and how and where you can learn. Speaking of, don't forget that Magicians Only is sponsored by magiconthego.com and gives you 1,000 tricks in your pocket, 1,000 videos. That's card tricks, coin tricks, stage, stand-up, lectures, interviews, the history of magic, antique magic, future magic, you name it. It's all here on the app. It's everything you could ever want or need if you want to learn about magic. If you are a magician, it gives you material and ideas to improve your shows. It's really an incredible resource. Essentially, Magic on the Go is an encyclopedia of magic in your pocket. So check it out now. Right, let's get on to the episode. All right, here we are. We're back with more stories from my adventures in the former Yugoslavia. Some of them I just can't tell because those involved are still living. Also, just want to remind you that this is definitely a no-holds-barred podcast. If you're easily offended, please stay away so you can sleep at night. Thanks. The first thing that I wasn't ready for was the corruption. So basically, kind of Eastern Europe, a lot of Eastern European countries, they work on, you grease the right palms and you get the stuff that you need. But also you have to be aware that stuff goes missing, and that's just the way it is. I remember getting to the airport and I had my big trunk, and of course it got x-rayed, and they were like, what the fuck is this? Because there were knives, and it was just nuts. There was a thing that looked like a gun. It was a bang gun. And so they pull me aside and they opened up the trunk, and now a lot of magicians have stories like this about customs people going through their props and asking them what they are. But this was intense. I mean, they pulled everything out. I had voodoo dolls. I had this voodoo doll trick that I was doing at one point. And they asked me what everything was. And then they would ask me to demonstrate it. And I think they were having the best time. They were laughing their asses off because they make me do all these tricks to prove they were tricks. Not just weapons. I wasn't just bringing weapons into the... I remember saying when they gave me shit about the dagger, I was like, don't you have knives in Yugoslavia? Is this a rare thing? But they basically said, and then at one point they were like, I needed to tell them how the tricks worked, which I refused to do. And they were like, listen, we work for the government here. You can trust us with your secrets. And I said, you can come see my show. One of the interesting things that happened was this whole Yugo Tours thing was sponsored by the Minister of Tourism. And so even though I knew that you had to grease the right palms in order to get stuff done, and I didn't do that at the airport, by the way, that would have been rough. That came later. But I also knew that the Minister of Tourism was a very powerful person. And so I was told that if we got into any shit, we should drop his name, which I immediately did at the airport, and I said, I'm here as a guest of this guy. And then they were like, oh, well, you should have said so. And they let me through. So I remember I get on a bus and I go to my hotel, which was Hotel Horizont in Baška. Baška means Baška's water, because it's right on the water, and water comes down to the village from the mountains. Hotel Horizont. There were only 2 hotels in Baška at the time, and it was this wonderful little beautiful fishing village. It was I always say it was a coming of age and an age of coming, and it was insane, guys, because I fell in love every week. There was this little club The Yugoslavia Club was down in the basement. There was a guy by the name of Andro who was the bartender, and this guy had every scam going. He was so charming. He was so lovely. He did this really cool thing with a straw where you dip it in water and then you put it on the side of the glass. So when he would serve up a drink, the straw was kind of, because it was still in the paper wrapping, it was dipped in water, put on the side of the glass. It would cling, and it would be like his own little magic trick. And I remember giving him a number of different things to use. One of the things he loved was that gag where you have a saucer and a cup and you put your finger through the handle so that it's an empty cup, but you pretend like it's full of coffee. And then when you offer it to the spectator, you let the cup slide off the saucer as if it's going to fall into their lap, but it's really hanging from your finger. Oh, he used that all the time, and he got so many tips. We had a little scam going where he had a big scam going, actually, where he would write off so many bottles of wine as being given to the customers as prizes, but actually what he was doing was taking most of them home. And I learned so much about life from Andro. He was just wonderful. He did keep trying to get me laid, which is a story we might get to at some point later on in this already too long podcast. Listen, I'm telling you, this was one of the greatest experiences of my life. Can you imagine being a teenager and actually running the club? So I had to open it in the morning. I had to do games in the morning with kids. In the afternoon, we put on movies. I would go out, go to the beach, go snorkeling, whatever, be back to do a show. First show will be right before dinner at 6, and then the second one will be a little bit later on. They wanted me to try and keep everyone there, so they kind of moved the times later on to doing both sets after dinner. And I did stuff like, the biggest mistake I ever made was a beer drinking competition between countries. So we would get like English, French, German, and Spanish, everyone. And so I would have, like, one guy represent England, one guy represent France and Germany, and then they would give us a ton of liquor. And the first night we did it was a huge success. The second time we did it, I said that the British won, and I might have been biased on that one, but it wasn't a fight that erupted, but there was definitely a rebellion and some throwing up as well. So we decided not to do that one again. But I met so many beautiful girls. I can't tell you. I remember this one guy was really angry, this dad, that I'd been hanging out with his daughter. And now that I have a daughter, I totally understand. But I remember he was from Bavaria, and he'd driven down in his sports car, and he had wanted me to go for a drive with him. And he didn't speak much English, but by the end of driving through the mountains at 100 miles an hour and scaring the living shit out of me, I realized that he was warning me to stay away, which of course I didn't. One of the waiters there was always a bit rough with me. He was kind of punching and shoving me. And then one day he invited me to an island trip. He said, we're going to have an orgy on this island. And he said, you're more than welcome to come. He said, if you want to bring a deck of cards, you can, which is like every magician's mantra, right? This is the thing with being an entertainer. You always often get invited places only because you can entertain somebody's friends. This has happened to me throughout my entire life. But it turned out it was going to be a fish picnic and an orgy on this island, and I didn't go, and it's one of the biggest regrets of my life. So imagine I'm doing these shows and I'm learning my craft and I'm falling in love every week. I remember this one girl who used to come visit every month or so, and she was a dancer in a folk dancing troupe, and she spoke no English, and obviously I didn't speak any Serbian or Croatian at the time. I was learning it slowly, and she got so drunk because I got drunk, and then she got drunker. She drank a whole bottle of vodka, and then we had to take her to the hospital. These are things, teenage experiences that you have. I'm really kind of not going into the details of that one, but it scared the living crap out of me. For an entire year, I was drinking every day. And I remember at one point pulling out a deck of cards and my hands were shaking just from all the alcohol in my system. And I quit at that point, cold turkey. But it was it was a hell of an adventure. There was a guy, I remember we weren't supposed to have people back at the room, and I had been working on doing hypnosis in the show because I thought it would be a good 20-30 minute segment, and I got all these wonderful hypnosis books from Davenport's. There was one by a guy called Eddie Dexter who had written this book on hypnosis, and I remember in the book it said you mustn't do things like telling people they can't feel pain and then sticking needles in them, or telling them that they're rigid and putting them between two chairs and standing on them because you could break their back. And then at the back of the book is all these newspaper articles and reviews of Eddie Dexter performing hypnosis, and it literally says, and it was amazing when he stood on this woman and told her that she was strong, and it was just such hypocrisy. But I was learning, I was having so much fun with hypnosis privately, like for friends. There was one guy I could hypnotize to the point where I gave him waking hypnosis commands where, you know, I'd hypnotize him and then tell him that anytime I told him to do something and snap my fingers, he would do it while he was awake, and which was hilarious because we would often prank him by having him fall asleep while he was eating his spaghetti, and his face would go, I know it's mean, I'm a teenager, give me a break, and his face would go in the spaghetti. So there was this guy who was an entertainer also at one of the nearby villages, and I just remember his name was David, that's all I remember, and he came over to visit on his day off, and I decided to throw a party in my room, which was very ambitious because it was a very, very tiny room. And there was 4 or 5 girls that we were going to invite back. I got some food, I got some beer. I remember opening up the back window, which kind of opened up into the grounds behind the hotel. And the plan was to have this amazing party. He, at one point, brought up hypnosis, and we started talking about it, and all the girls were like, can you hypnotize me? Can you hypnotize me? And David said, I bet you can't hypnotize me. I'm an arrogant 19-year-old, right? So I'm going to give it a shot. So I have him sit, and the party's going great, by the way. We've got music and food and beer, and everybody's getting on really well. And I hypnotize this guy, and it goes really well. And he's doing everything I'm telling him to do, and the girls are laughing their asses off, and we're having a great time. And then I go to wake him up, and he won't wake up. And I can't get him to wake up. And at one point he starts breathing, hyperventilating like he's incredibly angry, and then rips off this chain. He had this beautiful crucifix on a silver necklace, and he rips it off and he throws it across the room. And at this point, it was party over. The girls left, and it was just him and me, and he's sitting on the bed, sitting upright, bolt upright, and I can't get him to wake up, but I can get him to, I'm like, just you're getting sleepier, you're feeling like you're going to fall asleep. So I get him to lie down on the bed, and now I'm completely freaking out. And as a teenager, I'm thinking to myself, this is it, my life is over. I shouldn't have messed with this stuff. What am I doing messing with hypnosis when I don't even understand how the brain works? Like, what if he never wakes up from this? What if he has psychological scarring? I'm not even supposed to have had somebody in my room, for fuck's sake. I'm going to get into so much trouble. And so throughout the course of the night, I keep trying to wake him up, and nothing is working. Occasionally there's angry yells and screams, and then quiet again. And finally I leave the room, and I go down and I sleep in the back of the theater, because that's all I could think about doing. I was like, I don't know what to do at this point. In the morning, I barely slept. I get up, I go back to the room. He's still asleep, but now there's writing on the walls of my room in blood, red blood. I don't remember what the messages were, but they were probably pretty scary. And that was it. I was freaking out. I went to the assistant manager of the hotel and security. I explained the situation. I said, I think we might need to get an ambulance here. And we get back to the room, and he's sitting upright on the bed, like he just woke up from a deep sleep, and there's no writing on the walls. And I'm thinking like I'm going mad. Anyway, the security were like, you shouldn't have had a party. This is a warning. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Won't happen again. And this guy, David, we had coffee that morning. He didn't remember anything about what had happened that night. It was the freakiest thing. He goes off. I don't see him really for the rest of that particular summer season. But we had a it was a lesson for me not to mess with stuff I didn't understand. We had a rep whose name was Sasha, and I'm in touch with him now, Sasha Grabaric. And he was wonderful, and he was a Yugo Tours rep who would greet the tourists when they came and deal with their complaints. You know, they would say shit like, you know, the sun's too hot. And how the fuck am I supposed to do about that? But he would have to deal with those kinds of complaints. And because I always say the British, you know, when they're in the country, they do nothing but complain about how awful England is. But as soon as they're out of the country, everything's not like home, is it? You know, that's pretty much the way it is. And Sasha came to me one day, months later, and he said, you know that guy David, who the entertainer at the other hotel? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, he's been bragging to everyone that he pranked you and got you really good with some hypnosis thing. Ah, man, I was fuming. I think he'd wanted to get me fired because I was in the better hotel. So I didn't really confront him about it, but I never forgot it. That really did a number on me because at that point I was very naive. I trusted everyone. I thought everyone was my friend. And that was my first experience of don't trust anyone. There were many other things that happened in Yugoslavia. Times when I almost died. I stormed off. I was fighting with this girl, and I stormed off up into the mountains to walk home from this bar. And all I could hear were wolves howling around me. Stupid stuff like that. But it was an amazing experience. I ended up spending 2 years in Yugoslavia, having all of these adventures. In the winter, I went to a place called Lake Bled up in Kranjska Gora, Ljubljana. And that was amazing too. I had one accident skiing. I spent the rest of the time at the club in the après ski lounge, making it look like I was skiing, but not actually skiing. But that was an interesting time because that particular dance floor where we had to do everything was really a pit, surrounded on three sides. Everybody was up 10 feet looking down on the dance floor, which made it the worst possible place to do any kind of entertainment, and especially magic because of the angles. So I had to completely rework the material that I was doing. I remember I'd always open with this vanishing milk pitcher routine, and I had this great thing that looked like a beer mug, so it didn't look like a magic prop. And I would pour it into a cone of newspaper, turn it upside down, the milk wouldn't come out, rip open the newspaper and find inside a microphone. And then I would plug that microphone in just as the music ended and say, good evening. And it was always an applause puller. It was a great opener, but I couldn't do it. So the one trick that I think killed the best in that environment was the card stab. And it was a single card stab. So I brought a guy down on stage, gave him a deck of cards. He chose a card, shuffled it back into the deck. He signed it, shuffled it back in the deck himself. And while he was doing that, I blindfolded myself, had a table, and then we would spread the cards out on the table, and I would stab down on one card with this giant dagger, lift the table, all the other cards would fall to the floor. And of course, the card on the end of the knife was the signed card. This is a killer single, I think one of the greatest single card revelations you can do. So powerful, so strong. But here's the thing. It was during a performance of this, I came up with one of the best possible bits for a card stab, which is that you give the deck of cards to the guy and give him the chosen cards separately. You turn your back and you say, I'm going to blindfold myself and you're going to put the card anywhere you want. And then I want you to shuffle the cards. Now, most people will put the card back in the deck. But on this one particular occasion, this guy decided to put the card in his pocket. And I knew he'd done something because I could hear some people giggling. So I took the deck back from him. And thanks to the short technique and method of the trick, I was able to come to the conclusion that the card had not been put back in the deck. So I riffled the cards and I said, there's 51, you haven't put it back yet. And that brought the house down. So every single time from then on, I did the card stab. I would pick a guy who was a jerk from the audience And I'd always make sure he showed the card to everybody so that he couldn't say it wasn't. And that's why I had him sign his name on it as well. But I always picked the guy that was a bit of an arsehole, because 9 times out of 10, and they think they're so original, he put the card in his pocket, and I'd have that really great moment. The craziest thing, I can't believe I'm going to tell you this, but because this has absolutely nothing to do with magic, but it does have to do with surviving situations. Andro had said to me, had been trying to get me laid, and because I was a teenager, and he thought that's all I was thinking about, and I was pretty much. That's all I really wanted. But he introduced me to this woman. She was a bit older than me, and she lived on the other end of the village, and she was a divorcee, and there was an issue with dating local girls where. I remember that it was explained to me that if a local girl dated a guy from out of town or out of the country, she was considered tainted, that it was a bad thing. So even though I had a mad crush on this girl at the front desk of the hotel, there was no way we hung out secretly every now and again, but she was so paranoid it wasn't fun. So anyway, Andrew introduces me to this woman. We go back to her place, and we get it on, kids. And I was doing magic for her, and breaking the ice because she didn't speak much English either. But the magic, you see, magic, it's so great. It breaks so many barriers. And we're back, and we have a great night. And I'm lying there, and I have to use the bathroom, and I'm really got to go. And as I get up to go through this other door, she stops me and explains to me in broken English, I can't go in that room. Her daughter's in that room, sleeping, a 5 or 6 year old daughter, and that's where the bathroom is. So she's like, just go outside in the bushes. So I'm a little drunk. I'll go outside. Bear in mind, start naked. I pee in the bushes. Door locks behind me, and now I'm outside the house. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm naked, and if I bang on the door, I'm going to wake up the daughter. So I'm whispering. Anyway, the woman, she'd passed out. She'd fallen asleep while I was outside. And I spent the entire night hiding behind a bush, hoping that no cop came by and to arrest this naked streaker. And it was terrifying. Every time a car drove by, I was hiding. Oh my God, it could have gone so bad. It could have gone so bad. In the end, she got up, she came out looking for me, and she brought out my coat, and I was freezing cold. It was such a stupid thing to do. I didn't see her again after that. I think she just realized that I was an idiot. So Andro was a huge fan of my magic tricks, and he saw me doing card tricks at the bar and for people on stage. And like I said, I went through a lot of material in those days, tricks that worked for me from the Max Maven books, especially, specifically with a 4-sided triangle and nucleus. I tried doing a routine of his, a number of routines of his that didn't work because I really didn't know, I didn't have the chops to present them effectively as a powerful mentalist. But I loved Max's material, and I told him so years later when we became friends, which was a great thing that happened in my life, to become friends with someone who is, your hero, your creative hero. There was a bar that was not for tourists, it was for the locals, and it was hidden back in the village. And it's where we would go after DJing. And so about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, Andro would close up the club, and we'd all go over there, and it was great. The guy that owned it, he would always make a little plate of food for us, for prosciutto and olives and cheese and stuff like that. And we would drink Slivovitz and beer with the beer chasers. Bearing in mind, I'm 19 and I'm drinking Slivovitz shots, which is kind of like their tequila, and washing it down with beer, right? So one of the problems with being a foreigner in this village, and I touched on this before, is that you are nobody trusts you, and it's a problem. No one trusts you. You're the foreigner, and so it was difficult to actually make friends outside of the tourists. Andro was so lovely in trying to introduce me to everybody, but when I would go into this bar, I remember it was always a bit tense. And but Andro was he was telling me about this poker player who was traveling around Yugoslavia. He was a famous poker player. He had his cronies with him, and he would just go into towns and challenge people to games of poker, and he would fleece them. And I didn't know if he cheated or if he was just really good at poker or what the deal was. But Andro says to me, he's coming into Bashka Voda in a couple of weeks. How about you play cards with him? And I was like, what? I don't know how to play poker. And he goes, no, you can use your card tricks. I'm like, you want me to cheat? He's like, yeah, whatever works, And I said, no, absolutely not. I don't know how to play poker. And if I do cheat, I don't want to get caught by some, I don't know if he's a mobster. I have no idea. No way. So I turned it down. A couple of weeks goes by and we end up at the bar. And I walk in and everyone's lovely to me. People are slapping me on the back, buying me drinks. And then in walks the poker player. And what Andro had done was set up a poker game, face-off between me and this guy, and let everyone in the village know that I was going to win because I was the card expert. Now, this is very similar to a story that magicians will often use for a card trick called the magician versus the gambler. Only this actually happened to me. So I'm already pretty hammered at this point, and I'm very upset. And the gambler, I remember he came in, he had some of the people from the village were on his side, some of them were on my side supporting me. I guess people had made bets. It was fucked up. So he sat down at the table and he looked like Sydney Greenstreet, if you know that, the Maltese Falcon, kind of like a big fat guy with a kind of a cream white linen suit with a cigar. I mean, he was a cliche poker player, right? And he sits down and he slams the cards on the table and he goes, "We're going to play cards." And I was like, no, I don't play poker, thanks, And everyone was like, "Go on, Steve, you can beat him. We know you can do it." And then Sydney Greenstreet, he goes, "Oh yes, I hear you're a magician." Okay. And he grabs the cards and he does this really lame card trick where he pulls the 4 kings out of the pack. He goes, "Stuff like this," and everyone goes nuts, right? So immediately my ego kicks into gear. I'm like, that trick sucked. And he got that kind of reaction. Oh, hell no. So I grab the cards from him and I do a trick with his cards. And my people react and his little eyebrow goes up. And this happens back and forth. And he's like, we have this kind of dueling banjos card trick thing. And I said, I really can't play cards with you. I said, because I'm going to be forced to cheat and then you're going to probably want to kill me, right? And he didn't even smile at that moment. So I think I made the right choice. So we're going back and forth. We've got dueling banjo card tricks. Finally, he says, "You know what? This kid is okay. Drinks on that." And he buys drinks for me and everyone relaxes and claps and cheers. And I'm like the hero of the moment, kind of. And I think about half an hour went by. But there's a lesson here that I want to impart to you. And that is, the lesson is to listen to your gut. Read people, use your intuition. If you don't trust someone, there's a fucking reason that your body is sending up warning signals. So this guy acted like everything was done. And part of me, I don't know, even though I was pretty hammered at that point, part of me was also pretty sure we weren't done. So as I gathered up the cards and put them aside, 4 of the four aces that I'd pulled out for an earlier trick, I palmed them off of the deck and I put them under my leg. Nobody was watching at this point. Everybody was relaxed. Anyone could have done it. It didn't have to be a magician at that point because everyone had been drinking so much. And a good half an hour goes by and this guy's got a twinkle, this poker player guy, he's got a twinkle in his eyes. And finally he grabs the cards and he goes, "Okay." And now it went silent. And he shuffles the deck and he puts it on the there's 2 decks actually. It was a red and a blue, and he shuffles them together and he says, "You find me 2 aces and you are good. 2 aces." Now, I had the 4 aces under my leg. In hindsight, what I should have done was make a bet with him. Like, okay, but you buy everybody here a drink or something. But I didn't. All I could think was, how the hell am I going to get the aces into the deck in order to pull them out? Because my hands were so sloppy at this point. I've been drinking so much and I was so tired. So, there's something about the arrogance of youth and also the naivety of the drunk that enabled me to pull it off. So I picked up the deck of cards and I said, not only will I find your 2 aces, I will find it with the deck underneath the table without me even looking at the cards. And so I put the deck under the table, and as it was under the table, I grabbed the aces out from underneath my leg, right? So now I had 4 aces on top of the deck. And I said, here's 2 aces. And I pulled out the 2 black aces. And now the place erupted. And Andro was so happy. He had been sweating at that point. I think maybe he put some money on me. But I pulled out the 2 black aces. And then he said, it's just like in a movie. And the guy goes, what about the other 2? And I had them on top of the deck. So I did a quick flourish production of the 2 red aces. The place erupted. This guy the whole night was like, you have to tell me your secret. I need to know how you do this, but I wouldn't obviously say. And from that moment on, I was, I wouldn't say a local hero, but I was a local. Near the end of my run, there was a lot of tensions within the country. My Croatian friends were arguing with my Serbian friends. I'd honestly thought that there was a communal hatred for the Albanians at that point, and I noticed a lot. There was a lot of talk. So I assumed that there was going to be war with Albania. Kind of what was happening in the village was a microcosm of what was happening in the country. And I remember getting a knock on the door one day saying, you need to pack up. We're all going to the airport this afternoon. It's time to leave. And that was when war was breaking and things were getting very, very, very dangerous. And I don't think I fully realized the seriousness of the situation at the time, but I do remember people being very nervous, rushing us to the plane and getting us out of the country. I never went back. And ironically, my brother, who had come to visit me at one point, he was in the British Army. And at one point, he went to serve in Bosnia. As I was leaving, he was going in. And so it was a really horrible way to end the experience. I lost touch with almost everybody except for Sasha, who reconnected with me via Facebook. Thank God for Facebook, because that was great. And we've swapped some stories about how things went after I left. I lost touch with Andro. I don't know if he's still around or if he's gone. The reps, Sasha, still in touch with him. And then Zaga, who I love very much. And I lost touch with Zaga. She was the other rep at the hotel. And, it made me very sad to think what was happening to this beautiful country and these wonderful people who I just spent the last 2 years with. So looking back, it was an amazing experience. It was a sectional awakening. It was experiences of life and almost death. I met a lot of incredible people. Maybe one day I'll tell you about Sanguine, who was this monk who stayed at the hotel for a while, but that's another story for another time. But I'm very grateful for that, because I got so much stage time performing all these different tricks. And trust me, there were times when I died on my ass. I remember this guy filmed a show. He actually had a video camera, and at the end of the evening, he came up to me, he handed me the tape, and he said, you should have this. And I said, no. I said, why don't you keep it as a memory of the show for tonight? And he was like, nah, you have it. It must have been really bad. I still have the tape, and I'm trying to get it converted because I can't imagine what I'm going to see. One last thing that I think, the very positive thing that came out of my time in Yugoslavia was there was a kid who was about 7 or 8 years old who was really into magic. And I remember his mum came up to me and asked me if I'd do a trick for him, and I did. And I took him backstage and I showed him all the props I had. And, like you do when you're a magician, not mentoring specifically, but be kind to people who love what you love, And years later, many, many years later, over 30 years later, I get a message on Twitter from a magician who says, you don't remember me, he said, but when I was a kid, my parents took me on vacation to Yugoslavia, and you were so kind, and you were so, and he said, I remember the show that you did. I remember Nucleus. I remember the rice jar suspension. He said, I remember all the tricks that you did. And then he said, you remember you took me backstage with my parents and you showed me all the props that you bought with me. And I remember the big giant blue trunk that was packed. I mean, he just had so many amazing memories. And he said, this was one of the reasons, one of the inspirations for me to become a professional magician. And I wanted to thank you for that. And I mean, I get goosebumps talking about it right now, because you just never know as an entertainer, as a human being, you never know when something you say or do is going to inspire someone for their future. And I'm super grateful. So that magician went on to perform on the West End and television and kind of rip apart cruise ships. I mean, just do really original, incredible eye magic. And that magician is Jamie Allen, and I'm proud of him in a way that's weird because he's not my kid, but seeing how far he came and seeing what he's achieved as an illusionist. In fact, we met when he opened Illusionarium here in Toronto. We met for the first time after 35 years, and maybe 32, 33 years, and we talked about those days, and it was clearly very important to him, and it was very important to me. And we talked about everything, including the fact that we had a lot of similar things where we were working on one-man shows. We were both working on Houdini projects. We both did. So there was a lot of parallels to all of this. But I remember thinking to myself at the end of all of this, and it can help, if this can help you, if this can inspire you in some way or give you solace. You know, as we go through life, we often wonder about the trials and the tribulations and the challenges that are sent our way, because we wonder what it means for us. What does this mean? Why do I have to go through this? Why am I doing this? Why am I forced to deal with these things? Maybe in the end, it's not about you. Maybe it's not about me. Maybe it's just about the people that we meet along the way and the lives that we can affect with a simple bit of kindness, a smile, a word of encouragement. Maybe that's what it's all about. This has been another episode of Magicians Only, sponsored by Magic on the Go at magiconthego.com. Astonish anywhere, anytime.